Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this playbook episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Froke, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Kosoglow. And folks, we are still in the studio live, and we are doing a series of leadership playbooks. And I'm personally extremely excited for this one because I don't think I've ever met anyone other than Mark who has literally taken an organization from zero to $100 million ARR, leading the whole sales org. Very rarely can someone even stretch across all of those phases? And even if they can, very rarely are they actually there through all of those phases. So if you're not familiar with Mark, he was Outreach's first hire ever. And then he led them all the way through as their sales leader through $100 million plus in ARR. So we're going to break down each of the key phases from $0 to $100 million in ARR, how the role of a VP of sales, CRO, head of sales, or first sales hire changes in each of those phases. And then we'll talk about the transitions. Where are those ARR milestones? When do those phases change? And then what are the things that you need to do to prepare yourself to enter each phase? So Mark, you described the $0 to $1 million ARR bucket as the doer phase.
Yes.
Talk to me about what that means.
So this mirrors my experience. And then honestly, at Outreach, I had this amazing ability to meet with the best go-to-market minds almost every single day and talk to them about this kind of stuff. And this is collectively kind of how I define this. We're trying to find product market fit. So let's talk about what's happening in a company from 0 to 1 million. Does our product work? Products on fire usually because of bugs and stuff like that. CEO is out there wondering, am I going to get to my next level of funding? And what happens is when you're brought in as that first sales hire, guess what your job is to do? To let those people do their job and you do yours. And so when you start to come into a company like this, if you're not a doer, then what you're going to do is you're going to ask other people to do stuff, and that's going to take them away from the most critical thing that happens at this part of the company stage. Listen, sales is super important, and that's the only way you get from 0 to 1 is somebody selling something. But I would argue that if the product team and the CEO and everybody get everything right, you don't need sales to be that huge of a part. And so you can't let it expand kind of beyond what you're doing. So let me give you a story at Outreach. In the beginning at Outreach, I would wake up at about 6:30 in the morning and I do a little bit of journaling and stuff like that. My first demo would typically be at 7 a.m. I would demo back to back, half hour, almost every single day without a break from 7 until 4:30 or 5. Literally, I don't know how many hours that is, 10. I would do 20 demos in 10 hours.
Jeez.
There would never be a break. I didn't eat lunch. It was just insane, right? Now, did I go complain about that? No, I just did it. Did I go talk to somebody about needing an SDR now because I'm in deals? No, I just figured out how to keep filling my pipeline. I was a doer. And you know what I did from 5 to 10 p.m.? That's when I took my kids to soccer practice. That's when I helped make dinner. That's when I cleaned up after dinner. And then at 10, I put my wife and my kids to bed. And then I would hit Salesforce. And from 10 to 2 a.m., I get on the phone with my man, Manny O. And Manny and I would build out Salesforce because I needed a quote to cash system. I needed this. I could have gone and asked somebody, but no, I needed to do it. And did I have to watch dozens of hours of YouTube videos to do that? I did. But you know what? What happened in that time was Manny Medina, the CEO at Outreach, moved a little bit out of sales and he started working on the vision, on the company, on the culture, on getting the right hires. And all of the rest of the company started to fill in because I was like, listen, if it has to do with sales, I'm your guy. I'm doing it. I'm not trying to find anybody else out to do it. I'm the doer. And if you can be that as a first sales hire, kind of IC, head of sales type of person, then you get the chance to make the next jump. But if you're not a doer, if you're a distractor, and I'm working with a couple companies right now that have their first doers, and I can see within a quarter, do I have a doer or do I have somebody that is actually further along in their maturity and acting in a way that isn't congruent with the company is right now? Don't forget, your job as a sales leader is to meet the company right where they're at, but to be preparing yourself so that you're ready to take the leap for what the company needs next.
Yeah, so a lot of times people will come to me because I was first sales hire at Pave and led them from 0 to 10, not 0 to 100. But in that 0 to 1 phase, I don't think people realize what the job was.
Yeah.
The first job is you have to do the sales cycle. And what I mean by that is exactly what you described, like the full sales cycle. So that means you don't have an SDR. So I was doing 150, 200 cold calls a week as the person who was closing all of the deals and as the person who was expected to hire out the org.
Yeah.
So that's like just the other jobs that you start to do. A big red flag that I see that will tell me that someone's not a doer is when they come on board and they're like, how do I get SDR support?
Yeah.
Like to me, that's a huge red flag. Or how do I get a sales engineer? I was like, sales engineer?
Yeah.
I was like,
what?
Dude, we might even make you code as an AE over here. I was like, what's a sales engineer? I was like, no. None of that stuff. That's number one. You need to do the whole sales cycle. Number two, you need to do everything that is required to support the sales cycle and the systems. So people don't realize, like, I literally had to go and buy Salesforce and install Salesforce.
Create your sales deck.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I got to create my own sales deck. So I'm like calling up. We didn't have logos or branding or anything like that. So I'm like, finding people on Upwork and Fiverr.
Yeah.
And I paid this guy like $20 in Pakistan to like put together like our initial sales deck and all this stuff because we were like broke and bootstrapped. And like that deck took us literally from 0 to $2 million of ARR.
Yeah.
Like there was no one to do any of that stuff. So you have to be able to do the whole sales cycle. You need to be able to set up all the sales systems. You need to also be able to set up your sales process.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this for a second. I think one common mistake with early stage sales is most sales reps make a lot of money because they learn the sales process that your organization has given you, and they learn the best way to execute that. In 0 to 1, you might not have the right sales process yet. You might not even know the right way to close a deal. You might not realize that if you don't get access to the CHRO by call 2, that deal will never close. So can you talk about, when you think about finding sales process market fit, right? How do you go about figuring out what your sales process is going to be?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the journey from 0 to 1. And a doer is a rep that would do that no matter where they're at. Like they're going to take whatever is given to them and they're going to make it their own and put their personal stamp on it. And I think this is just that to the max. Like I'll never forget my first demo of outreach. It was literally, this is the home screen. This is the list of all your prospects. See this icon? It means this. And I literally took them through like it was some kind of technical walkthrough of every button and every icon. After 2 or 3 of those, I was like, wait, stop. This isn't working. Let me go back to what I know, right? And 3 or 4 iterations. And that's where you have to be so careful, is you have to be able and willing to iterate. If you can't iterate, then you can't build the sales process, because the sales process in the beginning, you're going to start with a guess or a hypothesis or how you're used to doing it. And it's going to evolve over time. And I think that that's another, like, so how do you know you don't have a doer? One of the first things they ask for is for help. Like that means you don't have a doer. Secondly is they're not willing to change on the dime the minute that they find out something's wrong. That's another person that's not a doer. There's somebody that wants to be told what to do and what to change. And you can't have that from 0 to 1. Got to have somebody that is willing to do it all themselves, and they're self-aware enough to know I need to change and are able to do it.
That's one last key thing is I remember we had our discovery trees where we had, this is the situation the prospect is in, this is the problem that we think they have, and this is the impact of the problem. And what we would do is every single time we couldn't get someone down that tree, we would like draw it on the board and we'd be like, what question did we ask that pissed off the prospect? Like, okay, what are 7 different ways that we could ask that question instead? If we're not getting any of the right answers, then maybe we have the wrong problem tree entirely. And we need to realize that this actually isn't the problem that people want to solve with us. And so let's get out of the doer phase, 0 to $1 million in ARR. You're mostly doing all the stuff on your own. Talk to me about the transition to the builder phase, which is 1 to 10 million in ARR.
Yeah, so the builder phase is when you're going to start hiring people. It's when the numbers get so big and there's so much, the complication starts to add up and the process starts to become repeatable. That's when you get to add in people. And so often, like, that's not when people add in people. They start right away, all right, let's get somebody in here. Okay, they've sold a couple deals. Let's hire somebody else. They'll sell twice as many deals as if we have 2 people. And really what you want to get to is the place where, all right, I can see and explain, and we talked about this in our leadership, our sales manager thing. How do I know how to explain what I'm doing? And until your first sales hire does that, then you need to be very careful about hiring more people into. Otherwise, you're going to have 2 people trying their own thing in an own separate way, right? So a builder's main job is start to build up the foundation of people, process and systems that on which you're going to start to build the rest of the org. The builder still like, like your contractor, like my contractor, if he has to, he'll go do the drywall, right? If he has to, he'll go like take the toilet off and replace the wax ring. But you know what? He really has other people that kind of do that stuff. But so you still, as a builder, you still got a hammer on your tool belt. You're still going to have to do deals. You're still going to have partly a number. I had a number at outreach till probably like $5 or $6 million of what I needed to contribute. So you're still doing the job, but you're adding this extra layer on and you're starting to hire other doers. And this is one of the key concepts of this model is when you progress to one level, your job is to hire the backfill, the hire that you just left. So when you go from doer to builder, as a builder, you need to go hire doers. Don't hire other builders. Don't hire people that won't be doers, because when there's only 3 of you, you all need to still be doers, right? So builder's job is to hire doers and to make sure that they set in place the foundational processes, systems, and people that like get the sales org some momentum.
So I've seen a lot of people make the mistake of they sub themselves out of too many things too quickly.
Yep.
And they also sub themselves out of the wrong things too early on. And so could you talk about what were your first couple of hires at Outreach once you reached about $1 million in ARR? And what were the things that you chose to get off your plate versus keep on your plate and keep your hands in?
So we had an amazing sales velocity at Outreach. So I did $1 million in about 6 months and so it was quickly becoming apparent that like I couldn't do it all myself because I was having so many meetings and so many leads. So we went really aggressive with our first hire. We hired 4 AEs and 4 SDRs all at once. All right.
What?
Yeah. Now, why would I do something crazy like that? Well, first of all, like didn't know what I was doing. Probably wouldn't have done that again. Right. But I would say that there was some thought behind it in that 3 of the 4 AEs were close personal friends that I had worked with for years. And the other one was a super strong referral from somebody that like I completely trusted. All 4 of those reps stayed with me for 4+ years.
Wow.
And one of them is still there as one of the top AEs at Outreach. So that kind of allowed me the SDR org, we did a great job hiring there. And again, hired a lot of people that we knew, late 30s, early 40s, more mature people, first sales job, and just like trained them the right way. So that was kind of how we started. I don't think that should be a typical way that you start, but what you should make sure that you do as a sales leader, as far as like, what am I going to keep and what I'm going to do, is your job is to like slowly move out. So in the beginning, when you hire that first person, you do everything together. It's tag team. They're with you. Batman and Robin, do your thing. Once you get that person to a level of competency where they can handle some things, then that's when you start to back yourself out and work on this stuff that surrounds that. So for example, let's say that you get them really good at discovery calls. That's your chance now to go, let me figure out and write my manual on discovery calls. Let me go ahead and build this deck and lock it in. And in this phase at Outreach, by the time we got to about 2 or 3 million, I had written a 107-page sales manual. That was everything from these are the technologies you download, this is how to install them, and these are the settings that you set up, to this is how you run a discovery call, this is how you do negotiations. And that's because I took each part of the sales process and what my reps were doing as I watched them, and I'd be like, all right, let me go sit in the corner here for an hour and bust this part out. And I just made sure that, again, I kept my doer hat on and I just went and did it. I didn't hire an enablement person. I just did it, but it was building the org. So that's why it's important to make sure that you don't move too fast out of one section to the next, because you still need to maintain some of that doer quality early on.
I think one thing that's really important is anytime you leave a room or anytime you're leaving a set of duties, you've gone through all of the shit of figuring out the right and the wrong ways to do it. And in the early stages, it's like, it's half part skill, but it's half luck and trying enough things to make sure that you're not making the same mistakes. So if you spent 6 to 12 months selling this thing and you figured out every single reason a deal dies, and then you're like, all right, I'm not going to sell deals anymore. If you don't document all those reasons that a deal dies, all of the sales processes you've taken, all of the different steps within the call, all of the stories you tell within a demo, what you're doing is you're literally resetting the clock on the next rep because you're still in the early stages. Yeah. You're restarting the clock on the next rep, and now they need to go and figure out all that stuff out themselves. And so as you go and you take a step back, you need to make sure that you document the stuff along your way and then you stay close to them. So you're watching the calls, you're staying on these calls. You're not just like saying like, okay, there's someone else to do this job. I don't have to do this job anymore.
Yeah. Process makes you great. Documentation makes you legendary. And so don't shoot for greatness when you can be a legend. Like just take the time to document it out. And more importantly is like, don't leave everything. Like your job isn't to, I remember somebody used to tell me, well, my job is to like hire myself out of a job. And that always never quite made sense to me, because what it says is like, I'm going to hire somebody, then I'm out of that now. And at this crucial phase, when you're starting to go from product market fit to like, all right, we can actually scale, there's so much that needs to be done that you still have to have a little bit of your doer hat on. You can't just go straight to builder.
100%. Just as a parallel example, I didn't hire 4 and 4. That would be bonkers. But I did hire 2 and 2.
Yeah.
So we hired 2 AEs and 2 SDRs, because oftentimes hiring reps in pairs is really helpful, because if you only hire one, you never know if it's just them or the product or something else that's causing an issue. But then 2, you get that healthy competition. You also get out of the echo chamber of your own thoughts when you're selling alongside someone. So hiring pairs is one other thing. So we hired 2 AEs, 2 SDRs, and 1 RevOps. And that early RevOps hire was super, super, super helpful for the business. Just getting basic things in place, like having an opportunity object set up the right way, having the entire total addressable market uploaded into Salesforce, making sure that if someone wanted to pull a report for all of the companies that had funding in a certain time frame, all of that data was actually in our Salesforce. Getting that set up on day one, it made it so that we could have the output of 10 reps with a 5 rep team, because RevOps was doing all of the stuff to make all of the reps faster.
RevOps, that's a learning that I've taken with me. The very first hire I did when I went to Catalyst was I hired a RevOps person. Like that, it's a cheat code. That should be probably your first hire in most cases. So don't underestimate the power of RevOps. Now, here's something that's important to say about a builder. A builder doesn't write plans. You know, when you hire like a quick contractor to like, I need you to put in the new backsplash in my kitchen, he doesn't like go out and write detailed architectural drawings and all that kind of stuff. He goes to Lowe's, he gets the tile you want, and he starts with his hammer and he breaks it apart. And you have to be really careful in this phase not to become a future phase like an architect, which we'll talk about in a minute. Your job right now isn't to create like super detailed, meaningful financial plans and projections, because the business just isn't in a place that you can do any of it based on data. And if you don't do it on data, it's just based on your guess. And you do not want to get it in a position of having to be judged against your guesses. I want to be judged against my informed decisions, not my opinions. And so the builder that tries to create the blueprint is always going to end up having that blueprint suffocate them, versus just be building. Just get the money in. That's your only job to 10 million, not to create like a spreadsheet that's a mile long with all these comp things and your org chart build out and all your segmentation. I tell most companies, like, you shouldn't even be thinking about segmentation until between 10 and $25 million. Just run the deals and hire good enough reps that can run the deals.
Completely agree. And I made the mistake of trying to figure out every single conversion metric by stage when I had 6 reps. And I'm like, just look at them.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. Let's talk about the next phase. Going from builder, 1 to 10 million ARR, which is really a manager role, to doctor, which is 10 to $25 million in ARR, which is what you consider like a director role. So now managing managers.
Yes.
What are the key roles or distinctions between a doctor versus a builder?
I think if you've really run the builder part right, like you're running fast and messy. And you're not trying to necessarily, like you said earlier, like diagnose the stage by stage conversion rates. You just know you don't have enough deals. So are we missing our number because we don't have enough deals, or because we're not winning enough deals, right? All the answers should be able to be done with simple mathematical formulas. If you have to get into algebra, calculus, extremely complicated sales formulas, you're on the wrong trap. The doctor, though, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. You've now put in place, in this fast and messy way, here's the foundation. This is how we do it. We actually have steam. We have like, the market is responding to how we're doing things. Now it's time to start to fine tune. It's like the difference between dropping in a new engine or like looking at for exactly what spark plug isn't sparking, right? The builder drops in the engine and just runs the car. It might not run great, but like it's running. The doctor's job is to get in there and fine tune that thing so it's humming, right? So the doctor, you switch to a much more metric, analytical, numbers-based role so that you can start to build the corpus of data that you need to start to make really strong data-driven decisions. And you start to build a culture of we make decisions around what we see in the data versus the builder is, listen, let's huddle up real quick. What are we doing? Boom, let's do that. That sounds great, right? Which is more consensus-driven.
So I remember this happened to me. I paid right around 10 million bucks in ARR. And I don't know if it was that mental milestone of 10 million ARR where I was like, okay, these metrics are starting to matter a lot more. I can't touch every deal. I'm managing managers. And the day in the life of a sales leader changes a lot at this point in time. Can you talk about what does the day in the life look like for a doctor versus a builder?
Yeah, a builder, I would say that you're still a lot of what's on your calendar is sales calls. You're still going to have a lot of one-on-ones, obviously, since you're probably still directly managing people. So it's filled up with that kind of tactical stuff that a regular sales manager would do. The doctor is now that manager of managers. They're now the director. So the job changes. And we've talked about like manager to rep is a huge transition. People manager to manager of managers is another huge transition, right? So some differences in your day is you're not going to be on as many sales calls because if you're on a bunch of sales calls, what are your sales managers doing? And if your sales manager and your rep are on a sales call, you're weird. All right. So
triple stack.
Yeah, right. We have $10,000 deals.
Team selling.
Yeah, it's
all the sales team. Yeah. 10 reps.
So you start to move out of sales calls. You start to move out of one-on-ones. Your one-on-ones go from weekly to maybe monthly with reps, right? You're spending a lot more time with your cross-departmental partners. So demand gen, do you understand their numbers and how they impact you? RevOps, are they showing you what's happening inside your process? And customer success, are they showing you what's happening with the deals after them? You have to start to zoom out and take a bigger look at what's happening to diagnose stuff. Because if we go to the doctor and you say you have a headache and they talk to you for 5 seconds and they're like, well, listen, we need to get you an MRI right now. You're freaked the fuck out, right? But if they're like, wait a second, you haven't drank any water for the last 3 days, you're dehydrated, go drink some liquid IV and you'll be fine, then everything's not that big of a deal. And that's where the doctor phase, it becomes very important. You can make a headache an MRI situation, or you can make it just drink some more water situation. And the doctor's job is to minimize the blast radius on what the answer is. Like, it's okay if it's MRI, but make sure it's MRI with the data. It's okay to give somebody liquid IV, but don't give somebody liquid IV that needs an MRI.
I think the role of a doctor that is oftentimes most understated is you are preventing thrash on the organization. And so if you see a blip in the numbers or if you see the sales numbers go down, oftentimes what will happen in this phase is every other department will start trying to get the sales team to do all different types of things. Next thing you know, your managers are running 17 new types of trainings with all their reps and all that jazz. And so I think it's a really important point that you make, which is if the answer is to just drink some water, make sure that the entire org is not overreacting, because your job is to make sure that people understand how the sales organization is run. And John Scher on an episode earlier gave a really good example of there are different metrics that you should be using to run your sales organization internally versus the metrics that you show externally to someone who doesn't understand the beast of sales.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really gets mastered in the doctor phase.
And I would say 2 important lessons in the doctor phase are L1 and L2 metrics. L1 metrics are lagging metrics that are like, all right, how much revenue are we generating? How many meetings are we creating, right? Leading metrics are the things that you use to diagnose a problem happening to a lagging metric. So if you're not booking meetings, you need to look at, are you dialing enough? Are you sending enough emails? Are you targeting the right people? Are your people using the right messages? And so it's really important in the doctor phase to clearly define your L1, your lagging metrics. And then how do you diagnose the problem is by defining the L2 metrics that your managers and your builders, because you're now a doctor, so you have to hire builders, that your builders can use to diagnose their own problems by themselves. So that's one concept, L1 versus L2. And then the other concept that you need to understand is a volume metric versus a conversion metric. So you need to line up your funnel so that you understand your volume metrics, which typically are your L1 lagging, right? How many calls did we do, right? That's a volume. It's just a number. And then there's the conversion, right? How many calls do we convert into book meeting set, right? A Volume number is the result of the behavior that creates conversion. So you can never actually change if you book more meetings, but what you can do is you can change how well you convert phone calls into meetings, right? And so that's an important distinction to make sure that you have in your coaching to conversion, which is behavior, versus volume, which is the result of the behavior.
Boom. All right, so we have doctor phase, 10 to 25 million. Let's move on to architect phase, 25 to 100 million, and that is what you consider to be a true VP of sales.
That's right. The architect is now when you're completely cross-departmental. Like your job is inseparable from your VP of marketing, your VP of success, maybe your CRO, maybe your VP of finance. You now have to take into account, what is the blueprint that I'm going to create? What are the diagram drawings that I'm going to create so that somebody knows how to do this little detail of the sales process, or this little deck needs to look this way, right? That architect's job is to see how all those pieces are coming together and where are the areas that like you're a little worried about. So segmentation starts to come into play. Maybe we want to create segmentation on geography or on size of deal, or number of employees or something like that, right? You start to think about segmentation. This is where you start to think about your comp plan. How's my comp plan tie into the behaviors that I need to get from my doctors and my builders, right? Because again, now you're a architect, you got to hire doctors, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is the real key to me of like, this is a switch from leader to executive. So we went from doer, which is an IC basically, to a manager of people, from a manager of people to a manager of manager. And now what we're trying to do is that next leap to I'm an executive, like I'm leading leaders, right? And that jump to executive is not quite as foreign as the other previous two, but it's still a little bit difficult. But this is, in order to be an executive, you have to be part of an executive team. No executive is alone on their island. And the architect's job is to make sure that no builder or no subcontractor doesn't understand what the whole plans are. And that's mostly what your job is to do your piece of the company's blueprint around the GTM side.
It sounds like a lot of these projects are not necessarily longer term, but they're much more bigger sweeping initiatives. So you might have to go through an entire month-long or quarter-long analysis on, we got to redraw our entire segmentation lines,
yep,
right? Or we need to rethink our pricing and packaging, and that's where I need to work with my marketing team, or things of that sort. I'm curious, what is your level of involvement with things like forecasting, digging in on deals, when you're literally running an organization that's doing 25 to 100 million?
Yeah. I say that at Outreach and at Catalyst, the higher that you get up, the less control that you actually have over everything, which just seems very different, because everybody's like, well, I'm a CRO, like I'm the boss. Actually, being a CRO is an exercise of, I have no control. I just need to make sure that I've given good directions. I have a good plan. Like I'm a good architect, and I've now said, here you go, right? Like, can we follow the plan or not, right? So I think that that's a big piece of it. If that's your main job, then that means that you have to give up other things. And partly what you do give up is being on sales calls. Like a VP should only be on the most important sales calls, not that many. A VP should be going through with each of his directors or sales managers their top 10 deals, not every deal, right? And if you've been a great architect to this point, right, and a good doctor, you've created these processes along the way that make sure that the frontline manager that maybe you only meet with once a quarter now is actually running the processes that you have in place, right? Like, again, the architect's job isn't to just create the plans, it's to make sure people are following the plans. And so that might mean that you are just making sure people are following your forecast methodology that you created when you were more of a doctor or a builder.
So let's say that you're brought in as an architect, and you're pretty foreign to the sales motion. Like, there's no way you're going to learn all the nuances of how reps run discovery calls, your 5-stage sales process, the forecasting methodology, and all that stuff. One thing that I've seen with a lot of these more senior leaders is they actually can lose touch with what's going on at the ground level. So I know, fortunately, you were at Outreach all the way from $0 in ARR through the $100 million mark. But if someone's coming into a sales organization, how can they effectively enact change on the organization and enact influence on how people are selling when they're fundamentally really far removed from the action?
So I would tell you, I don't think they can. I think that you have to, like, if you can't run your own deal as a sales leader and don't have enough expertise, then you have no real business figuring out what's wrong with it or how to change it. But you can't do that right away because it takes time to orient yourself and figure those things out. I would say that if you can't do those things right away or are so foreign that you have to work your way to them, the most important thing is just building those relationships. Like the relationships will help you create change, help you figure things out. But if you don't build the relationship, then you'll never get to the understanding. If you don't get to the understanding, you actually won't change anything.
Alrighty, Mark. And then give me the 1-sentence riff on communicator phase.
Yeah, the communicator's job is now to mostly work outside of what's going on with the company, and meaning that like my job is to clearly communicate what my expectations are, clearly communicate the timeline by which I need those expectations to be met, and then evaluate the mental model by which people use to fix them. That was the biggest revelation that my executive coach gave me because I lost my way around $150 million and I didn't feel like I was adding value to outreach anymore. And my coach helped me define it like, Mark, your job now is more about communication than anything. Clearly communicate expectations, when the time by which those expectations need to be met. And the last thing is what is the mental model used to create those solutions?
Folks, 30 minutes to 150 million plus in ARR. We started with the doer phase 0 to 1, builder 1 to 10, doctor 10 to 25, architect 25 to 100, and communicator $100 million plus. Folks, Mark broke down all of this stuff in one of the keynotes a while ago. And so he has an entire deck where he walks through all of these phases and what it entails in each of those. And so if you enjoyed this session, there is a link to that down in the show notes. And we will do tons of more content if you give us some feedback. So if you like this one, go connect with Mark on LinkedIn and tell him what you thought. And honestly, ping him and tell him what you want us to cover next on the Leadership Show because we love doing these live sessions. Alrighty, folks, we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks.